In this video, I'm going to talk about my trip out to LA for the Harley-Davidson Sportster S press event. So just a few days ago, I spent an entire day in Los Angeles, California with the Harley-Davidson crew test riding the brand new Sportster S. And we did all kinds of riding, from in-city riding and traffic riding, lane splitting, which was a first for me.
Look at what I'm doing for the first time.
As well as ripping through the mountains. I didn't do a whole lot of in-the-moment vlogging on this motorcycle because I was really focusing on getting a feel for the bike, and I wanted to know exactly what you guys, the audience, were interested in knowing. I got on my social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, as well as YouTube, and I asked you guys, what do you want to know about this bike? And boy, did you ask some questions. This was just from one Instagram post, not including the static comments down below. So I took all of these questions cross-functionally and narrowed them down to 5 main questions that almost everyone asked. Those questions are as listed in popularity. Most popular: was it comfortable? Was the exhaust hot on my leg? Was it fast? Is it worth the price tag? And finally, did this motorcycle feel like a Sportster? A couple key features and clarifying points to this video: there were 2 motorcycles that I rode on this trip. They were the same platform, but one had mid controls and one had the forward controls. The forward controls come standard on this bike. Mid controls are an upcharge. We can talk more about that later. So I started the morning out on the bike with the mid controls. We rode through downtown Los Angeles, across the LA River. We took a whole bunch of photos and rollers, and just really gave me a feeling for in-city riding, tight maneuverability, slow speed maneuverability, as well as the practicality of the motorcycle as a city rider.
We're in Los Angeles today, being some of the very first people to ever demo ride the brand new 2021 Sportster S. I don't even think these motorcycles are out for demo rides yet. I am riding this beautiful white bike today. I chose this one because it has mid controls right here, whereas some of the other ones have more forward controls, if you can see that over there. So we are about to go do a photo shoot right now. So I wanted to capture this moment because it's just initially going to be my very first time thoughts and impressions.
The bikes, how to start them?
Well, I'm familiar with traditional Harleys.
Yeah. So here's your your on-off switch. There we go. So turn it on. Press and hold this button for just a second. I'll start the engine.
All right. Oh, 500 pounds. My goodness. Oh, that exhaust is right there. It's so easy to walk. Oh, I already have a cramp in my hip. Woo! Oh my gosh, this is incredibly lightweight. Oh my god, I can't even feel the bike under me. Woo! This section of the video might be just a little giggly and a little goofy because we're just gonna go get some pictures taken, then we're gonna come back, eat breakfast, and then like later on in the afternoon we're actually riding out up into the mountains, and that's when I'm really going to have the opportunity to experience this motorcycle, open it up. But this is gonna be a very nice introduction to just kind of get used to what's going on. Oh my gosh, it's a totally different motorcycle. The indicators are only on the left-hand side of the bike. That is not normal for Harleys. There is just so much going on. Woo! Brakes work great. I don't know how I ended up in the front. I always like being in the back. Nice, that's so much technology. This thing is just so much.
So to answer the first question, was this motorcycle comfortable? That depends. For me, on the mid-control bike, yes. Very comfortable. I never felt that I was too top heavy. I never felt that I had a lot of weight on my wrists, on the handlebars. My feet were nice and planted under me, giving me a great seating position. If I did start feeling a little cramped, I could shift my weight easier, and I loved the mid-control motorcycle. Later in the day, I swapped motorcycles while we were doing photos through the mountains. So we were on beautiful twisty mountain roads and I was on the forward control bike. Within 15 minutes of being on the bike that comes standard with forwards, my hips were killing me, my wrists were killing me, and my back was killing me.
So I will say, after riding around on the mid-control model this morning, the forward controls are a bit uncomfortable. If you guys have super long legs, that might not be an issue, but I definitely find it kind of hurts my hips. But I'm getting old, so that's neither here nor there.
I'm 5'7". I have an inseam of about 31 inches. I could very comfortably flat foot this motorcycle, but I will admittedly tell you guys the forward controls were not my vibe. It is very disheartening that you don't have the option standard to get mids, especially for the Sportster being such a small platform motorcycle. You would think that the mids would come standard and the forwards would be an option. Not too sure why they did that. It is about a $700 upcharge. On the topic of comfort, let's talk about slow speed maneuverability. This motorcycle has huge tires, and I mean chunky thick tires. That was all I could see when I saw the photo, other than the exhaust, was how big those tires were. Admittedly, doing my very first U-turn in the city, I had to like stop and kind of walk it because I wasn't used to the turning radius of that bike at all. It was my very first time riding it. But once I started getting used to the weight and the lean angle, these bars were so tiny, so nimble. You had incredible turning radius with the bars. U-turns were a breeze after my first couple tries. The seat height on this bike is 28.9 inches. As I mentioned, I have an inseam of about 31 inches. The bike is incredibly lightweight for a cruiser. It comes in at about 500 pounds, and I loved being able to feel confident and planted and comfortable on this bike while we were sitting at a standstill. On the subject of the exhaust, it does have that classic style tracker high pipe exhaust. Aesthetics are different to different people, but the heat, it's there. You can feel it. I did not get burned. We were riding through the mountains, sitting in the dead hot sun of Los Angeles. I never physically felt uncomfortable enough to remove myself from the motorcycle. Sitting at stoplights, riding, I couldn't feel it at all. Riding, it was wonderful. It does put off heat. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, but for me personally, it was not enough to make me physically uncomfortable on the motorcycle. The next big burning question is, was it fast? So in case you are unfamiliar, this is Harley-Davidson's brand new Revolution motor. In the Sportster S specifically, this is the 1250T Revolution motor. This was my very first time experiencing this motor from Harley-Davidson. The technology in this engine and in this motorcycle is like nothing I have experienced before. So when we left, I kept it in road mode and was a little shocked at how twitchy it felt. There was a couple times where I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, you know, it's really twitchy. But as soon as I became acclimated to the throttle response, everything smoothed out. After a couple hours of riding in road mode, I finally switched it over to sport mode. And to answer your question, is it fast? A 1250cc motorcycle. Yes, it is fast.
We are bombing it down the highway. And boy, I'm gonna tell you what, this bike gets it.
It is torquey. It has 94 foot-pounds of torque, and when you get on it, especially when you're in sport mode, it launches. Now, another question was, how comfortable was the seat, and did it hold you in while you're riding? When I very first saw this motorcycle, I was like, that little tiny seat is supposed to hold me in when I'm getting on this bike? Yes. The seat was incredibly grippy. I never felt any discomfort on the seat, and it keeps you planted when you're getting on this bike. And we got on the bike. So is it fast? Yes, it is fast. It is very responsive and it has loads of torque. Is it worth the price? It's listed for about $15,000 MSRP here in the United States, and for a Sportster, that seemed high. And I have to agree with everyone else. I was a little disheartened at how expensive it was for how traditional of a motorcycle it is. You know, it only has the solo seat, it has one foot control position, and I agree with many of you guys. I thought it was an overpriced motorcycle. After riding this bike, I don't think I can say that. With the seemingly limitless technology and safety features added into this motorcycle, it feels like a high-powered and a high-functioning bike. It doesn't feel like an old shaky Sportster that they slapped a $15,000 price tag on. This bike feels solid, it feels strong, and it feels like it has plenty of room for growth. So transitioning into the next part of that question is, does it feel like a Sportster? I have ridden many Sportsters. I haven't really ridden anything older than early 2000 Sportsters, but I can say it does not feel like a Sportster. Does it feel like a Harley-Davidson? It does. It feels like a modified, new, improved Harley-Davidson. It still has that lope. It does sound like a liquid-cooled version of a Harley-Davidson, but it is so incredibly light, so incredibly powerful, and you feel like you have a presence on the road on this bike. This bike, where it was torquey, it was so incredibly lightweight, the vibration was almost non-existent. You still feel it, like, please don't get me wrong, you still feel the motor under you, but it's nothing like you remember. So those were the main questions that you guys asked me. The bike itself, it's beautiful. In person, I couldn't stop looking at it. I could not stop looking at the motor. I could not stop looking at the lean angle and the aggressive stance it has to offer. I will say many of the questions was, how is the handling? Does it handle well? You guys went riding up through the mountains. Can it take a mountain corner? Now, personally, I am not a mountain rider. I live in Ohio. We don't really have mountain roads. We do have twisty roads, yes, of course. But I'm not a knee dragger by any means, so I was not carving corners on this bike. I was enjoying the ride on this bike. This bike has an incredible lean angle. I believe the lean angle is 34 degrees on both sides, and that is with the forward or the mid controls. Now, I do personally think carving corners would be a bit easier with mid controls on this bike, just because of the position your body gets in. And with that thick front tire, I was shocked at how well it could take corners. Speaking of the thick front tires, the tires themselves were just huge overall, massive. I mean, it really gave this bike a presence and made it feel like, you know? The tires were fantastic. I never felt like I lost grip. I never felt like we were bottoming out. These tires ate up the road. We rode on sand, we rode in gravel, we rode over broken glass. I mean, it's Los Angeles after all, and we rode on some of the roughest roads I've ever been on in my life. The tires were amazing. One of the other most common questions was the suspension. It is an adjustable suspension, and you can actually adjust it while riding. On the very first bike I was on that morning, I was on the mid-control version, and we adjusted the preload of the suspension to make it a little more soft. I loved it. I mean, you feel it. You feel the road under you, and it's fine, but there was never a moment where I was like, get me off of this bike. This is horrid. Later on in the afternoon, when I switched over to the forward control motorcycle, I didn't adjust the suspension. I kind of just forgot about it. You know, you're in a group, you're on a press event, you swap around bikes, and there's just, you know, my main priority was making sure I was switching my cameras. So I got on this bike, didn't adjust the suspension, and there were parts of the road where my teeth were rattling in my head because of how stiff the suspension was. So I got to feel a full spectrum. It was soft enough to be comfortable and still rigid enough to feel confident, and it gets hard. Let's talk about the technology and the display. There's a lot of tech in this motorcycle. And for me personally, as a Harley rider, it was a bit overwhelming. It does have a 4-inch liquid crystal display. The display is very clear, very easy to see. It is not a touch screen, so there are buttons all over the handlebars, which personally, I think the opportunity for this bike is to have the main components of a motorcycle be your main priority. That being said, the turn signals were very close to the horn, so I kept hitting the horn. I kept not disengaging the turn signals. My high beams were on all the time. I don't know, I just felt like everything was so clustered together that should have been spaced apart, and the things that were spaced apart were things I wasn't using, which was the controls for the actual tech on this motorcycle. Things I love about this bike. I love the look of it. Honestly, when you see it in person, it's amazing. It's so beautiful. The details are stunning. I love the look of this bike. It's so crazy to say that because when I first saw the photos, I was kind of like, oh, it's cool looking. Yeah. Would I buy it? Probably not. But when you see it in person and you see the way the sun hits it and the way everything is just fit together like a perfect puzzle, I was smitten with the bike in person. On that same flip side, I do think the exhaust is a bit big. It seems huge in the photos. It doesn't look that big in person. Everything feels like it fits together nicely on the motorcycle, but the exhaust has some opportunities for sure. Another positive of this motorcycle is I loved the ergonomics of how I felt while riding it. I am a bigger woman, but this bike was short, I was planted, and it was very lightweight. While I was riding on the bike with the mid controls, I loved how in control of this bike I felt, truly. One opportunity on the flip side of that is I do think it would be nice to have bars that set you back and up a little further, because I did catch myself when I was leaning forward. I had wonderful visibility of the road, but my indicators were down really far. So when I needed to look down at my speed or my tack or to see if my turn signals were still on, I had to completely look down and take my eyes off of the road. I feel like if I was sitting back a little more in a more relaxed position, a slight glance would have done the trick. Things that impressed me right off the bat. The amount of technology and the customization of this motorcycle is impeccable. There are so many rider assist modes and modes that can help you dial this bike into exactly what you want it to be. Is amazing. I honestly didn't even know these things existed. I also think that helps justify the $15,000 price tag. Now with the additional add-on features, it can probably get pretty expensive if you plan on trying to two-up on this motorcycle or tour on this motorcycle, and there are options for two-upping and touring on this motorcycle. All in all, what do I think about this motorcycle? I think this bike is the right next step. I think this bike is filling a gap in the lineup of current Harley-Davidsons. I think this bike was a good decision. You gotta remember, the next generation of riders is already here. They're already in it, they're already learning, and they're already wanting more. I am very, very excited for the future of Harley-Davidson. As a consumer, I can see the pros and cons to both sides of people disliking change or needing change. Regardless, change is change and change needs to happen. If you have the opportunity to test ride this motorcycle, I highly encourage you to do so. If the day comes where more versions of this motor will come out, and if you have seen any other company do this, there will be more versions of this bike. I am certain of it, but ride this one first. It's unlike anything you've ever ridden from Harley-Davidson before, truly. I am forever grateful to have had experienced this opportunity with a brand that is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited for the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, if you have any other questions that I did not address in this video, there's gonna be a million other YouTube videos out there, so don't come at me. I'm only one person, but if you do have a question, ask it down below and I will give you my best answer based on my personal experience from riding this motorcycle. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, you be good, and I'll see you later.